Video games are so back. Expedition 33 is an example of a video game done right. This is what video games should be. They shouldn't be cash cows that are looking to prey on consumers and get as much money out of them as possible. They should be basically passion projects. A team of around 30 developers, which is a pretty poetic amount given the title of the game, created what is now considered one of the best games released in recent history, one of the highest reviewed games of all time, tying games like Red Dead Redemption 2. To have a game released now that's in that category on a budget of $5 million, it puts every other company in the game industry to shame that are trying to push out games with triple-digit million-dollar budgets and consistently failing over and over again and trying to create things that people don't want to play. Why did this work, but this doesn't? Well, it's pretty simple. Expedition 33 is made by devs who wanted to play the game. The devs themselves have said that the decision behind the art direction, the style, the gameplay, it's all driven by things that they as gamers want to experience. You have a turn-based RPG that incorporates elements from Sekiro-style parrying to class customization to RPG elements that are existing within the genre. Everything about this game just lives and breathes fun. There is no compromises made here. There is no hidden microtransactions. There is no weird pandering details. And everything is pretty simplistic and makes sense. There's no fluff in this game that makes things drawn out or doesn't make sense in terms of the gameplay, the story, or the context of the environment. It's basically a perfect game for all the right reasons. And, once again, made by 30 devs with a budget of $5 million. Basically the budget of a few CEOs' salary for a year. And the game released at below a $50 price point. In a time now where Nintendo and now Xbox are jumping on the train of $80 games, $90 games, nearly reaching $100 for a single fucking console game. For this game to come out and make fun of every single one of these devs and say, we can make something better for less and not ask for more, it's groundbreaking to me. Now, good games haven't always followed this formula. Not every game that is good is because it's cheap or because it was cheap to make or because the developers made something that was what they wanted to make. Look at Elden Ring, for example. Elden Ring, as described by the developers, is their close to ideal game. It's a game that released at $50, like most of the other games in the environment at the time, and it was a game that was wildly successful and has been successful for the past 3-4 years of its release. The reason for that is because the game is just good. There's been multiple quotes from Xbox devs and devs from across the whole gaming industry talking about how gamers don't know what they want, or they know what people want and they know what the consumers want, and they want to make something that consumers will love, and in the end, they flop. Because they don't know what they want. They don't know what the consumers want, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to guess, basically. Imagine this. You are trying to buy a gift for someone, but you don't really know this person that well. You don't know their interests, their past, what they have, what they don't have. So the idea of trying to shop for that person and buy them something that they will actually enjoy, it's pretty damn hard. And in the end, you end up giving them something that they don't really want and it ends up in the trash. It's a good analogy for what's currently happening in the games industry. $100 million games that are being made with no real draw and no real interest from anyone in the gaming industry. And then suddenly, a game comes out of nowhere with a minuscule budget and everyone wants to play it. Even look at things like Oblivion Remastered. Oblivion Remastered releases, it's a well-made, basically perfect remaster, everything you could ask for a remaster of a decade-old game. It doesn't do anything groundbreaking, it doesn't do anything insane, but it gives people what they want. People have been asking for a remaster or a re-release or something for these older games like Oblivion, like Morrowind, like New Vegas, and Bethesda give it to them. Now sure, they did outsource a lot of the work to another company to allow them to continue working on their own projects, and also for the company that has the better experience with Unreal Engine 5 to really make the most of it. But the point is that that's an example of a game that's being made that people want to play. No one wants to play Extraction Shooter number 500 from a developer that might have a lineage of pretty consistent titles. But if your game doesn't have anything interesting to say about it, then what's the point? It recently just got announced that the Titanfall studio was working on an extraction shooter that has since been cancelled. Number one, why? Why does everything have to be a cash cow? Why? It makes me so fucking angry when these companies go, oh, Battle Royale's popular, let's make one of those. Extraction Shooter, that's popular. And now my assumption is actually going to be, in the next sort of 2 to 3 years, the same thing that's happened with Souls-likes, everyone jumping on that train with some pretty big successes like Kazan, like Lies of P. I think that in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see an absolute shit ton of action RPGs come out, and a lot of those will be turn-based as well. The combat in Expedition 33 is near perfect. I couldn't fault it in any way. The only thing that I would want is the ability to use more skills, because there is so many skills in the game for all these characters that the combinations are basically endless. I do think that we're going to see another transition in the gaming space where instead of people focusing on Souls-like and going, oh, From Software, we want to do that, we want to make Elden Ring again, we want to make another Dark Souls game, we want to do that, or we want to, oh, you know, PUBG's really cool, or, oh, Tarkov, that's a really cool game. Instead of emulating things that already exist, make something new. There is so many indie devs nowadays that are making exceptional and groundbreaking titles that are incredible. And the rest of the gaming industry just doesn't seem to get it. In under a decade, the AAA industry is going to collapse. It just is. It's already started. Now, there are plenty of devs in the industry that are going to be just fine. You know, Rockstar, for example, they just delayed GTA 6 again today. But is that a problem for them? Not really. You know, if the speculation is true and that game does release at $80, $90, $100, $120, people are still going to buy it. It's one of the best-selling games of all time, GTA 5, that is. And the company that made that game makes a sequel to it. If the price point is $120, then it's going to still sell 30, 40, 50 million copies within a year or two. There's no doubt about that in my mind. But that is because of the history and because of the quality of the game. That was something that was cited in an interview with, I believe it was Doug Bowser, where he was talking about the price point of the new Nintendo games on the Switch 2. Now, say what you want about the Switch 2 price point. I think that the pricing of that console is fair, I guess. You know, this is a console that is pretty powerful for what you're playing on it. You know, when you buy a Switch, you're not buying it to play Elden Ring, even though that is now something that you can do on it. You're buying it so that you can play all the Mario games, you can play Breath of the Wild, and those games are built for those consoles. It makes sense, and if you can pay, you know, just under $500 for a pretty decent console to run those games, then sure, why not? But when it comes to the game pricing, seeing, you know, new Mario Kart digital launching at $80 and physical launching at $90, it's actually hilarious. But back to what I was saying about Doug Bowser basically said that the new price point of the games reflects the quality of the games themselves. Now, I ask you, does Mario Kart number 500 and Super Mario number 7000 and Donkey Kong number 487 sound like quality to you? Like, I'm not saying that these Nintendo games aren't good. Like, of all the companies in the world with track records that go longer than, you know, a decade, Nintendo does have a pretty good one. Breath of the Wild. The Mario games have been consistently great. Smash Bros, a massive success. Most of the games that they produce in-house and first party are pretty high quality. But the problem is that they're not $80 high quality. For instance, the new Super Mario game, when it was on Switch, not Super Mario Wonder, the one before that, that game released at $50. I paid $50 for that game. And I think I finished the main story in under 7 hours, probably. And then obviously you have a little bit of extra content on the side with getting stars and replaying or whatever, but it's a game that has realistically 10 hours of content. Now obviously, the amount of content in the game doesn't necessarily have to reflect the price point. For instance, free games like Fortnite and League and CS2, those are games that you can play basically infinitely. But if a game launches at $80 and you play it one time and you can finish it one time over a weekend or even a day, that doesn't reflect quality to me. Another thing is that Nintendo's style has stayed pretty much the same for the last sort of 10-15 years. There hasn't been a big leap in terms of graphical fidelity or stylization, unless you count Breath of the Wild, because that was a little bit of a step in a different direction, and that game does look beautiful. But in terms of the actual quality of these games overall, I wouldn't say there's been a massive leap in a decade. You know, I remember getting my Wii for Christmas in 2007 or something like that. Maybe it was a bit later than that. But the joy that I got from playing that Mario game back then was just insane. And then 12 years later, when I played the next Mario game on the Switch 2, or the Switch, it was the same. Now don't get me wrong, in both cases the game was pretty fun, it's pretty high quality, and it's enjoyable, but the problem is that to say there's been a quality jump since then, I really don't think there has been. I genuinely don't think that in terms of major quality jumps, except for a few things like Breath of the Wild, and maybe you can make an argument for some of the Mario games, for the most part, a lot of their titles have stayed roughly the same for nearly 20 years, which is pretty disgusting, and it starts to look pretty monopolistic, and it already does look monopolistic, when you start pricing these very basic games for $80, and you're targeting a fan base of die-hard Nintendo fans that are probably just going to buy it anyway, casual gamers who don't have a lot of time to play and are going to buy these games because that's what it costs, and kids. You know, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, your kid could come to you and go, "Oh, Mum, can I get a Switch for Christmas?" And you could buy him a Switch Lite, for example, for $200, and you could buy him 3 games, or 2 games, Mario and Breath of the Wild, for $100 if you're lucky. So you spend $300, and that's quite a lot for a Christmas present. And that kid's going to be pretty happy, and he's going to enjoy that experience, and he's going to have a fun time. But now, you know, a generation later, suddenly that Christmas gift turns into $500 for the console and Mario, or Mario Kart, there's multiple bundles, and then $80 for every game you add on to that that's first party. It's just insanity. It really is insanity, and it makes me really appreciate devs that are willing to price games at a fair price point, like Clair Obscur, like Black Myth Wukong and Kazan, these exceptional titles that have released in the last year that don't look to break people's bank accounts by asking too much of them. Another game, Baldur's Gate 3, that game launched at $50. It won Game of the Year, and that game has been out for just about 2 years now, and it has peaked 100k concurrent viewers consistently for 2 years. And it's a single player game. Now sure, you can play it with other people, but it is predominantly a single player game. For that game to consistently have that high of a player count and that much love and appreciation and respect and esteem is absurd. And that's also a game that has probably sold somewhere in the region of 10 to 20 million copies. Clair Obscur sold 1 million copies in 3 days. These franchises that aren't costing as much as these AAA games, you know, a lot of games nowadays that are being published by AAA studios, they're costing 100 million, 200 million, $300 million to produce a game, and that excludes marketing budgets and any other cost associated with it. So suddenly, this game has to sell 50 million copies to break even, when that's just not going to happen ever. You look at something like Clair Obscur. Clair Obscur has made its money back 5-fold by now. It has a movie in the works, a potential DLC that every single player is going to want to play, potential sequels if they want to go that way, spin-offs, or other games within a similar sort of universal gameplay style. This company that has made a single game has suddenly turned their company from, you know, very little valuation into being worth $100 million overnight. No other game company is doing this. Or when they are doing it, the successes just don't feel the same. Now, there are plenty of great devs in these companies. There are so many great devs in Microsoft. There are so many great devs in PlayStation that have this passion, that have this joy for games. And even in Ubisoft. Ubisoft recently released Assassin's Creed Shadows. And although that game had probably one of the worst launches and pre-launches in recent history, it still sold pretty good, and people reviewed it pretty good. Like, that is a game that probably shouldn't have done as well as it did, and it still did okay, all things considered. The problem is that these devs are trapped in these companies. They're stuck, and that passion is going into projects that are passionless at heart. There is nothing you can say about passion when it comes to saying the new Mario is $80. Where's the passion there? If you're truly passionate about playing games, you do Expedition 33. You say to the world, we're pricing the game lower so the most amount of people can play this game. Another game that's coming out soon, Elden Ring Night Reign. It's a standalone game that, number one, could have very easily been a DLC, but From Software could have quite easily priced that at $50 and probably would have sold the exact same amount of copies. But they didn't. They said to themselves, we don't think this game is worth $50, or we would much rather more people be able to play it than for it to cost more and for it to make us more money. It's a game that is now more accessible because more people can play it. Now, on the complete flip side of that, and this fucking infuriated me, and this is still in the From Software competition or conversation, the Duskbloods is releasing exclusively on the Switch 2. And my assumption is that unless From Software has control over the pricing, which I actually kind of doubt they do, that game is probably going to launch at least $70, if not $80, and that's a game that is basically multiplayer exclusive. It's a game that's designed around having other people in the world, and you're telling me that, number one, it's locked to a very specific console that isn't known for having that kind of game on it, And number two, it costs so much more money that it isn't worth even trying. When it comes to multiplayer games, why do devs continue to try and ask people to spend 60 over and over again, unless your name isn't Call of Duty? Call of Duty is always going to sell a shit ton, whether it's 70, 80, whatever. People love that game. And they can get away with it because the more people that play it, the better the multiplayer experience is. But when it comes to these other titles that are releasing that are multiplayer, why can't devs just take a leaf out of another game's book and learn and understand that that's not how these games work? Another game company, Hazelight, It Takes Two, A Way Out, and now Split Fiction. The way these games function is off of a friend pass, and it is one of the most ingenious things I've ever seen a game do in a long time, where it's a co-op only experience, right? You have two players that are playing this game, and you need two players to play the game. Not everyone wants to spend $100 to play a single game. So they go, oh, well, it's $40 and only one of you needs to own the game. So suddenly, I'm saving $60 for a single game experience, especially when it's a game that is a single story that doesn't have much replayability, that doesn't have expansive side content. It has a lot, but it's not going to get you invested for hundreds of hours. You're going to play it for 20 hours or so, and that's going to be sort of it. So for it to cost significantly less, it just makes sense. Another game, Helldivers 2. Now say what you want about the way that game has been run and the way that the devs have been working on it, but they released it at $40 as well. Games are being priced at suitable price points that make sense. Now the last thing I want to say about video game pricing is Game Pass. Now for me, Game Pass has been basically a blessing. I really and truly do love Game Pass and the ability to spend $10, $15 to play, a $60 game or multiple $60 games, as well as a long list of indie titles. I recommend anyone who hasn't subscribed at least try it, the free trial, because it is a pretty great deal. But the problem is that the company behind it, they're not known for pretty good deals. Increasing the prices of their consoles by $100, increasing the prices of the controllers by $10. These decisions by Xbox are just insane, and I think it's only going to get worse. Game Pass right now feels like an absolute steal at $10, $15 or whatever it is. And I feel as though in the next year or so, it's going to get price hiked pretty consistently as games get more expensive and the demands get higher and higher. But it's a real shame when people label games on Game Pass as almost a failure. They look at the Steam charts and they go, oh, it only got 3,000 players. The way that Game Pass works for a lot of people is it's their way of playing a game and accessing it. And for some devs, being on Game Pass can actually be a lifesaver in a lot of ways, because it means that more people can play the game. A good example of this is something like Another Crab's Treasure. That's a game that was priced lower on Steam anyway, and a lot of people playing it on Steam, but I played it on Game Pass and I really loved that game. And I've spread word of mouth and I've gotten other people to play it and they loved it as well. So the accessibility there is just insane. But if my game comes out and it's $80 or $90 or $100, if I have to buy a $100 game and it's a single player game that has a 10-hour story, it's a fucking joke. It really is a fucking joke. And the fact that it is becoming the norm in the industry, it's pretty frightening. And the next few years are going to either be incredibly great for video games because of these successes that we've seen, or they're going to be incredibly scary because of the pricing and because of the predatory tactics that these corporations are pushing on our industry. Okay, I'm done. That was a completely unscripted video. No cuts, no edits. It's something that I wanted to try because like talking in sort of longer form, and I thought I would give it a go. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you next time. Take care.